Ethan had heard a lot about the Zorothian princess before his mission, but he never imagined their first meeting would go this way. He stood in the grand hall of the palace, surrounded by tall, golden statues and intricate designs on the walls. The air was filled with the scent of exotic flowers, and the soft hum of alien music echoed in the background. Despite the beauty around him, Ethan felt out of place. He had been sent by the Human Alliance as a diplomat, but no matter how much he tried to adjust, the people of Zorath always made him feel like an outsider. The royal family was known for their strength and pride, particularly Princess Lyra, who was rumored to be as beautiful as she was powerful. Ethan had heard whispers about her sharp tongue and quick temper. She was a woman who never tolerated weakness, especially from someone like him, a human. When Princess Lyra entered the room, all eyes turned to her. She walked in with an air of confidence that was impossible to ignore. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back, and her deep blue eyes seemed to pierce through everything they looked at. The royal guards around her stood tall and silent, watching for any signs of trouble. Ethan couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and nervousness as she approached. "Ah, the human," she said, her voice cold and dismissive. "I was wondering when you would arrive." Ethan straightened his posture, determined not to show how nervous he was. "Your Highness, it is an honor to meet you," he said with a respectful bow. Princess Lyra's lips curled into a smirk as she scanned him from head to toe. "An honor?" she repeated with a laugh. "You, a mere human, think you can be honored by someone like me?" Ethan's face turned slightly red, but he refused to let her mock him. He had trained for this moment, prepared to deal with all kinds of insults and challenges. "I believe every interaction is an opportunity for mutual respect, Your Highness," he said, keeping his tone steady. She raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Mutual respect?" She scoffed. "Your species is known for being weak and unimportant in the grand scheme of things. Do you think we, the Zorathians, would show respect to someone like you?" She laughed again, this time with a cruel edge. Ethan swallowed the insult, keeping his composure. "I believe that actions speak louder than words, Princess. Perhaps we could begin by discussing how we might work together to improve relations between our people." Lyra didn't respond right away. Instead, she took a slow step toward him, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. "You are brave, I'll give you that, but don't mistake bravery for wisdom. You're a long way from home, human, and your kind has never been a threat to us." Ethan felt a pang of frustration, but kept his expression neutral. He had expected her to be difficult, but he hadn't anticipated this level of disdain. Still, he had a mission to complete. He couldn't afford to let her words get under his skin. "I'm here to change your perception of humans, Your Highness," he said firmly, "not just as a diplomat, but as someone who believes in peace. I hope you will give me that chance." For a moment, Lyra's expression softened, just barely. It was as if she was intrigued, but the moment passed as quickly as it came. "Peace," she echoed with a small shake of her head. "You think you can change the course of history with just words? You are so naive, human." The room fell. Silent, and all eyes were on them. Ethan could feel the weight of the moment. The princess had publicly humiliated him, and he could see the others around them waiting to see how he would react. He could have snapped back, given her a taste of her own medicine, but he didn't. Instead, he stood there, calm and steady, like a rock against the waves. "Perhaps you are right, Princess," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "But I would rather try than do nothing at all." Lyra seemed taken aback by his response. She studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face as if looking for any sign of weakness. Ethan didn't give her one. "Your pride will be your downfall," she said, her voice low but carrying a sense of finality. "That's not my problem." Ethan nodded politely, understanding that she wasn't ready to hear anything he had to say. "I understand, Your Highness, but I still hope we can find a way to work together." Lyra didn't respond, instead turning to walk away. But before she did, she gave him one last look over her shoulder. "Human," she said with a smirk, "and I'll be watching." As she walked out of the room, Ethan stood there, feeling the sting of her words, but he didn't let it show. He had a job to do, and no matter how difficult it became, he would not give up on trying to change her mind. The princess may have mocked him, but he wasn't about to let her judgment define who he was. He was here for peace, and he would do everything in his power to earn her respect, even if it meant proving himself in ways she never expected. Days passed since the awkward meeting between Ethan and Princess Lyra, and every moment felt like a challenge. Ethan knew that the road to earning the respect of the princess would not be easy, yet he was determined. He had been sent to Zorath for peace, and he wasn't about to give up. He couldn't allow one encounter to define his entire mission. Princess Lyra, however, seemed to think differently. Her behavior toward him was distant at best and openly mocking at worst. She made it clear that she didn't believe in human strength or abilities. But Ethan kept his head high. He wasn't there to impress her or anyone else. He was there to change the future of both their people. It was during a state event that things began to shift. Zorath was hosting an alliance meeting between several planets, and Ethan was assigned to attend. The ballroom was filled with diplomats and leaders from various planets, each dressed in their finest robes and formal attire. The space was grand, with high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and large windows showing the sweeping landscape of the planet's lush green fields. As Ethan made his way through the crowd, he spotted Princess Lyra across the room, surrounded by her guards. She was speaking to several ambassadors, her face lit up with charm and confidence. Despite the previous interactions, Ethan couldn't help but admire her grace. There was something magnetic about the princess that he couldn't ignore. Beauty was undeniable, and her strength commanded attention. But this time, something felt different. As he made his way to a quieter part of the room, he heard a sudden commotion. Without thinking, Ethan rushed toward the sound. A group of hostile alien warriors had broken into the event, their weapons drawn and their faces twisted with malice. The other ambassadors screamed and scattered, leaving the room in chaos. Lyra, standing at the front, remained still, her eyes locked on the attackers as they began moving toward her. Without hesitation, Ethan sprang into action. He'd been trained for moments like this, though he never expected them to come in the form of a royal event. He dashed toward the princess, not knowing if she would appreciate his help, but he wasn't thinking about her approval. He was thinking about protecting the people around him. As the first attacker came at Lyra, Ethan grabbed a nearby staff and swung it at the alien, knocking the weapon out of his hands. The creature roared in anger, but Ethan didn't stop. He moved quickly, taking down another attacker with a precise blow to the chest. But there were still more coming. The princess watched in awe as Ethan fought off the intruders with skill and determination. She had never seen a human fight like this before. His movements were fluid, sharp, and surprisingly effective. For a moment, her usual arrogance faded as she realized that Ethan wasn't just some weak, unimportant diplomat. He was strong. He was brave. Ethan kept his focus on the attackers, not stopping until the last one was on the ground. His heart was pounding in his chest, and sweat dripped from his brow, but he didn't care. His only thought was to make sure everyone in the room was safe. After the battle was over, the alien invaders had been restrained by the royal guards, and the room slowly began to settle. The other diplomats and ambassadors cautiously returned to their places, unsure of what had just transpired. But Ethan didn't feel like he had done anything special. It was simply part of his duty. Princess Lyra approached him, her eyes wide with admiration. For the first time since their meeting, her expression was soft, not mocking or distant. "You, .. She started, her voice quieter than before. "You saved my life." Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead and gave a humble shrug. "It was nothing, Your Highness. I'm just glad no one else was hurt." The princess was silent for a moment. She didn't know what to say. The human, the one she had mocked only days ago, had just done something she could never have imagined. He had saved her and the people she cared about, not for fame or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. "I didn't think humans were capable of such strength," she said softly, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled, though. There was no pride in it. There's a lot more to humans than people realize. Lyra stood there for a moment, her gaze lingering on him. She could feel something shifting inside her, a change she couldn't explain. She had spent so long seeing humans as weak and insignificant. But now, after watching Ethan fight, she saw him in a different light. He wasn't just a diplomat anymore. He was someone who would fight for what was right, no matter the odds. "Oh, you, my life," she finally said, her voice steady again. "I was wrong about you." Ethan felt a mix of emotions at her words. Didn't want her to think he was seeking her approval, but part of him couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride. He had proven himself, not through words, but through action. "You don't owe me anything, Princess," he replied with a smile. "We're all in this together." The princess nodded, though there was something in her eyes that told Ethan she wasn't finished with this new understanding. She had seen his strength, and now she wanted to know more. As the night wore on, Ethan and Lyra found themselves speaking more than they had before. The conversation was tentative at first, but it slowly grew more comfortable. They spoke about their respective worlds, their hopes for peace, and their dreams for the future. They didn't always agree, but there was a mutual respect that neither of them had expected. Lyra had always believed in the superiority of her people. And while she still believed in the strength of the Zorathians, she had to admit that Ethan had proven her wrong. There was more to him than she had given him credit for. And slowly as the night passed, something began to grow between them. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Ethan and Princess Lyra slowly began to change. The walls that once stood tall between them, built from mockery and pride, started to crumble. Lyra found herself thinking about him more than she wanted to admit. He had saved her life, yes, but it was something deeper than that. It was the way he had fought with such bravery, the way he didn't hesitate, even in the face of danger. Ethan, for his part, found Lyra harder to read. At first, she had been cold and dismissive, treating him like an outsider. But now, he saw the glimmer of something else in her eyes. A softness, a vulnerability he hadn't noticed before. He realized with a start that he was beginning to care for her. The princess was strong, but there were moments when Ethan saw the weight of responsibility she carried. Her royal title meant that she was expected to be perfect, to always be in control. But sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, he could see her look out the palace windows, her eyes distant, her face a mask of worry. One evening, they were both invited to a celebration for the successful conclusion of the peace talks with a neighboring planet. It was meant to be a night of celebration, but as the guests mingled, Ethan noticed that Lyra was standing alone on the balcony, looking out into the distance. He excused himself from the group of diplomats and made his way toward her. "Highness," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, her face momentarily surprised, but then softened when she saw it was him. "Ethan," she replied quietly, her voice a little distant. "I didn't think anyone would notice I was gone." "I noticed," he said, smiling warmly. "You seem like you have a lot on your mind." Lyra let out a breath and leaned against the railing, her gaze still fixed on the stars. "I always do," she murmured. "This crown, this title, it's not as simple as people think. Every decision I make affects millions of lives. Sometimes I wonder if I'm even capable of leading." Ethan stood beside her, looking up at the same stars. "I think you're doing just fine," he said gently. "You've led your people with strength, and you care about them. It's something not many leaders have." She glanced at him, surprised by his words. "You really think?" "So, I do," Ethan replied without hesitation. "You don't have to be perfect. No one is. You just have to try your best and be true to who you are." For a long moment, there was silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it felt surprisingly peaceful. Lyra turned her gaze back to the stars, her face thoughtful. "Sometimes I forget to just breathe," she confessed softly. "I push myself so hard to be the perfect princess that I forget I'm allowed to feel, to question." "You're allowed to feel," Ethan said, his voice soft and reassuring. "You don't have to be perfect. You're human, just like everyone else." Her eyes softened, and for the first time she allowed herself to show him a hint of vulnerability. She had always been so strong, so proud. But with Ethan, it was different. She felt like she could let go of her defenses just a little as they stood there. Side by side, something shifted. Lyra began to realize that Ethan wasn't just a diplomat to her. It wasn't just some human she had mocked in the beginning. He was someone who truly cared, someone who saw her for who she really was. Not just as a princess, but as a person. Ethan, too, found himself drawn to her in a way he hadn't expected. He had always admired her strength, her beauty, and her dedication to her people. But now, seeing this side of her, the side that wasn't constantly trying to prove something, he saw her as more than just a princess. He saw her as a woman. Someone who, just like him, had her doubts and fears. "I'm glad you're here," Lyra said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I would have made it through these talks without someone like you." Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious. "You don't have to thank me. I'm here because I believe in you, Lyra, and I believe in your people." For a moment their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them. Lyra felt a flutter in her chest, something she couldn't ignore. She had been fighting it for weeks, but now standing there with Ethan, she couldn't deny it any longer. She was beginning to care about him, but was it possible? Could someone like her, someone who had always been so focused on duty, actually fall for a human, a diplomat no less? A part of her wanted to pull away, to retreat into her familiar world of duty and responsibility, but another part of her, a deeper part, wanted to let herself feel, to embrace what was slowly unfolding between them. Before she could say anything, a voice called out from the doorway, pulling them both back into the present. "Princess Lyra." One of the royal advisors called, his voice tense. "There is urgent news from the border. We need you immediately." Lyra's face hardened, the princess mask quickly returning. She turned to Ethan with a look of apology. "I'm sorry, Ethan. Duty calls." Ethan nodded, understanding. "I'll be here when you're ready to talk." She gave him a small smile, grateful for his patience. "Thank you, Ethan. I'll never forget this." As she walked away, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth in his chest. The way she had looked at him, the vulnerability she had shown it, was more than he had ever expected from her. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There was more to this connection, more to their story, and he was starting to wonder if Lyra was beginning to feel the same way. Ethan's heart raced as he stood outside the palace garden, waiting for Lyra. It had been days since they had spoken on the balcony, and every day since, something between them had shifted. The tension that had once existed between them had slowly started to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding, something neither of them had expected. But tonight, something felt different. Lyra had asked to meet him, and Ethan wasn't sure why. His mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps she had finally come to accept him. Perhaps she felt the same way he did. Every moment he spent with her seemed to pull him deeper into her world, and a part of him longed for her to see him not just as a diplomat, but as someone who could stand by her side. When she arrived, her presence was as striking as ever. But there was something in her eyes that told him something wasn't right. She looked troubled, her face a mixture of determination and hesitation. "Ethan," she said, her voice quiet, almost unsure. "Thank you for coming." He smiled, though. A small part of him sensed the weight of her words. "Of course, Your Highness. What's on your mind?" Lyra took a deep breath, her gaze faltering as she looked up at the stars, her fingers gently tracing the edge of the stone railing. "I wanted to speak with you about everything that's happened between us lately." Ethan's heart skipped. He nodded, trying to keep his composure. "I've been thinking a lot about that too," he said, his voice calm, "about how things have changed." For a moment, there was silence. Lyra's eyes softened, but she seemed to be struggling with what to say next. "I owe you an apology." "Ethan," she began, her voice tinged with regret. "When we first met, I treated you like you were beneath me. I regret that you've shown me a side of humanity I never thought possible." Ethan was taken aback by her honesty. He hadn't expected her to speak so openly, and yet here she was, admitting something he never thought he would hear. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised her hand, stopping him. "Please, let me finish," Lyra said, her voice firm, but gentle. "You've earned my respect, but that's where it ends." Ethan's heart sank as her words hit him like a cold wave. "What do you mean?" he asked, though he already had an idea of where this was going. She turned to face him fully now, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. I can't allow myself to feel more for you, Ethan. I can't risk it. Ethan's stomach twisted in confusion. Risk? What are you talking about? Lyra shook her head, her long silver hair falling around her shoulders. I'm the princess. I have duties, responsibilities, and a future that has already been planned for me. I can't let myself fall for someone like you, a human, someone from another world. My people would never accept it. Ethan stood still, his mind reeling. He had hoped for more. He had wanted more. He had always believed there was something. Between them, something real, and now it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under him. So, this is it? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You can't even try. Lyra's face hardened, and for a moment, he saw the princess she had always been, the one who had mocked him, who had kept herself so tightly guarded. It's not that simple, Ethan. You don't understand the weight of the crown of the future I have to fulfill. I have no choice. Can't allow myself to be with you. The words stung, sharper than anything Ethan had ever felt. He thought of all the moments they had shared, the conversations, the quiet understanding. But now, he understood the truth. She wasn't free to choose love, not even for someone as kind as him. He took a step back, trying to process her words. He couldn't believe it. He had come to admire her strength, to care for her, and now it seemed like everything had been one-sided. I see, Ethan said, his voice colder than he intended. So, it was just a fleeting moment for you, something that didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Lyra's face softened with sadness. Oh, Ethan, it's not like that. It matters to me more than you know, but I can't ignore my duty. Ethan clenched his fists at his sides, the anger rising inside him. He had always known that being with someone like her would be difficult, but he had never imagined that it would end this way. Your duty, he repeated bitterly. I'm just a human, after all. Someone beneath you. Someone who can't be part of your world. Lyra's expression faltered. She reached out to him, but Ethan took a step back, his heart heavy with disappointment. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, her voice trembling now. But I can't go against everything I've been taught. I can't risk everything for something that might never be accepted. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. He wanted to believe her, wanted to understand, but the truth was, he couldn't. He had fallen for her. In this moment it felt like he was the only one who had allowed himself to feel anything real. I understand. Lyra, he said, his voice tight with emotion. I understand that your people, your world, come first. But I can't keep pretending that I don't care. Lyra's eyes filled with regret. I'm sorry, Ethan. He turned away, his chest heavy with the weight of her words. He had hoped for something more, something real. But now, it seemed like the distance between them was greater than he had ever imagined as he walked away. He couldn't help but wonder if he had been foolish to believe in something that wasn't meant to. Lyra, the princess of Zoreth, had made her choice. And Ethan, the human diplomat, was left with the bitter sting of rejection. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Ethan threw himself into his work, focusing on the peace talks with the neighboring planets. He spent hours in meetings, doing everything he could to keep his mind occupied. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop thinking about Lyra. The memory of her words, her rejection, stung more with each passing day. He had hoped that maybe, just maybe, things would be different. But now, he realized that hope had been a foolish dream. Lyra, on the other hand, found herself unable to escape the quiet pull that Ethan had left in her heart. She threw herself into her royal duties, but the weight of them felt heavier than it had before. Every decision she made now seemed clouded by the thought of him. She couldn't shake the image of Ethan standing before her, his eyes filled with disappointment, his words a quiet accusation that she had turned away from him. She had rejected him, yes, but it wasn't just because of duty. Part of her had truly cared for him, and that was the hardest part to admit. Each night, Lyra would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. She couldn't help but replay the moments she had shared with Ethan, the quiet conversations, the way he had looked at her with such honesty and kindness. For the first time in her life, she felt conflicted. She had always known exactly what her future held. She was the princess, the future leader of Zoroth. But now, that certainty seemed less important. Her heart, something she had tried so hard to protect, had been opened in a way she couldn't ignore. It wasn't until one evening, several weeks after their conversation in the garden, that Lyra could no longer pretend. She had to face the truth, no matter how much it scared her. She found herself walking down the long corridors of the palace, toward the balcony where she and Ethan had spoken so many times before. The moonlight bathed the room in a soft glow, but it didn't feel peaceful. The air was heavy, as if the world itself was waiting for something to change. Ethan stood alone, looking out over the sprawling landscape of Zoroth. His posture was stiff, but his expression was soft, as if he were lost in thought. She should approach him, but the pull inside her was stronger than her fear. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice a little shaky. He turned to face her, his eyes softening when he saw her. "Lyra," he replied quietly. "What are you doing here?" She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice steady but her heart pounding in her chest. "About what I said before." Ethan didn't speak, waiting for her to continue. He had heard those words before, the apology, the regret. He couldn't bring himself to believe it yet. He had been hurt, and part of him was afraid that this was just another excuse. "I was wrong, Ethan," she said finally, her voice firm with resolve. "I pushed you away because I was afraid of what it would mean for me, for my people, if I let myself care about someone like you." She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor. "But the truth is, I care about you more than I ever thought I could." Ethan felt a sudden rush of emotions, but he held himself back. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust her words, but the sting of the past still lingered. "Lyra," he said softly, "I don't know if I can just forget what happened. You told me you couldn't be with me. Now you're saying something different. I don't know what to believe anymore." She stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face. "I understand your hesitation. I've made mistakes, Ethan, but I can't keep running from what I feel. I can't ignore you any longer." For a long moment, there was silence between them. The sound of the wind was the only thing that broke the stillness, and Ethan felt as if the weight of the entire universe was pressing down on him. He had waited for this moment, but now that it had come, he wasn't sure what to do. His heart told him to forgive her, to let go of the pain and trust her once again. But his mind was cautious, reminding him of the consequences of loving someone who couldn't be with him. "I don't know, Lyra," he said quietly. "It's not that easy. I've been hurt, and I don't want to put myself through that again." Lyra's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she didn't look away. "I don't expect you to forget everything right away. I just want a chance. A chance to prove that what I feel for you is real." Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes locked onto hers. He saw the vulnerability in her eyes, something he had never seen before. It wasn't the proud, untouchable princess who stood before him now. It was a woman who had finally let go of her fear, who had admitted to herself that love wasn't something to be controlled. It was something that happened, something that couldn't be planned. He stepped closer to her, his hand reaching out to gently take hers. "I don't know if I can just forget, Lyra, but I'm willing to try." A slow smile spread across her face, and in that moment all the doubts and fears melted away. She had finally let herself open up, and she knew that no matter what happened, this was the first step toward something real. "I'll wait for you, Ethan," she said softly. "As long as it takes." The first time in what felt like forever. Ethan smiled, a true, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I think I can wait too," he whispered. And in that quiet moment, under the stars of Zoroth, they both understood that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. As a princess and a diplomat, not as a human and an alien, but as two people who had finally allowed themselves to love. Days turned into weeks, and though the air between Ethan and Lyra was now softer, their lives remained filled with challenges. Zoreth was still in the midst of fragile peace talks with neighboring planets, and both of them had a duty to their people. But as the days passed, it became clearer that they were no longer just playing roles of diplomat and princess. They had stepped into something much deeper, something neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. Lyra's people had noticed the change in her. The strong, proud princess who had once shown no interest in humans was now different, gentler, more open. Her advisors questioned her decisions and whispered among themselves. They could see that she was becoming less focused on royal duties and more focused on Ethan. Rumors about their growing closeness had spread, and it was only a matter of time before the rest of the galaxy noticed too. But Lyra didn't care. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the constant pressure to be perfect. Feel the weight of her crown hanging on her every decision. She felt free. And all of that had come because of Ethan. The human who had once been beneath her, who she had mocked and ignored, was now the one who had given her the courage to let down her guard. Ethan, too, felt the shift. He had once feared that his feelings for Lyra might be foolish, that they could never be more than a fleeting attraction. But as the days went by, his feelings deepened. He no longer saw her as just a princess. She had shown him her true self, the woman who carried the burdens of her people, but still managed to laugh, to be kind, to care. He had never felt more connected to another person in his life. It was on a quiet evening, after the peace talks had ended for the day, that they found themselves alone once again. Lyra had invited Ethan to the royal garden, a peaceful place filled with flowers from every corner of the galaxy. The air was warm, the sky clear, and the stars above them sparkled like diamonds. It was the kind of night that made everything feel right. Lyra was waiting for him by the stone bench, her silver hair glowing in the soft light. Ethan walked toward her, his heart pounding in his chest. Tonight felt different. He knew that they had both come a long way since their first meeting, since their painful rejection and the silence that followed. Now, they were standing at the edge of something new, something that could change everything. "Ethan," Lyra said, her voice soft as he approached, "I've been thinking a lot about us." Ethan took a seat beside her, his gaze meeting hers. "I've been thinking about us too," he said with a smile, though there was a hint of nervousness in his voice. Lyra looked out at the stars, her fingers gently tracing the flowers near her. "I've spent my whole life trying to do what's best for my people. I've always been the princess, always had to be strong, never letting anyone in. But you made me see something I never allowed myself to see. You made me believe that I could love, and that love could be real." Ethan's heart swelled in his chest, and he placed a hand on hers. "I never thought I'd be standing here with you," he said quietly. "When I first met you, I thought you'd never see me as anything more than a diplomat. But you've changed. You've changed me too. ... Lyra turned to face him, her eyes full of emotion. "I never thought a human could make me feel this way. I didn't think I could love someone from another world. But here we are, Ethan. And I realize now that it's not about the differences between us. It's about what we've built together, the trust we've shared." Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "I couldn't agree more. When I first arrived, I thought I was just here to do a job. But I found something much more important, someone much more important." Lyra's gaze softened, and she took a deep breath. "Ethan, I've spent my whole life building walls around my heart, protecting myself from things I thought would hurt me. But you've made me realize that walls can only keep you trapped. I don't want to be trapped anymore." Ethan's hand gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Lyra, you don't have to be trapped. Not with me." Her eyes shimmered as she met his gaze. "Ethan, I want to be with you. I want to be with you in a way that's real, without pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm ready to follow my heart wherever it leads." The moment felt timeless, as if the whole universe had paused to let them breathe. Ethan leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a soft, tender kiss. It was a kiss that spoke of everything they had been through, the pain, the rejection, the uncertainty, and everything they were about to become. In that moment, there was no princess, no diplomat. There were just two people who had found something beautiful in each other, When they pulled away, Lyra smiled, her heart light with happiness. "I don't know what the future holds, Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "but I do know one thing. I want to face it with you." Ethan's heart was full as he nodded. "I want the same. No matter what happens, we'll face it together." And so in the quiet garden under the stars, Lyra and Ethan made a promise to each other. They promised to love each other, not because of their differences, but because of what they shared. They promised to face the challenges of the future together with open hearts and unwavering trust. Their love wasn't perfect. It wasn't without its obstacles, but it was real. And for the first time, Lyra knew that she was ready to embrace it, no matter where it would lead. As they sat together, hand in hand, the future no longer seemed uncertain. For in that moment, they had found their place in each other's hearts.